Today we present to you the exhibition Weeping Woman by Petra Baldinger. In focus are the paintings and drawings which were created this year as the most recent contributions to the series Diffusion. The series Diffusion was inspired by the look through a textured glass panel in the beginning. We all know this visual effect that textured glass produces. When we look through it, we recognize the object behind it, but we cannot see it completely, we only see it in a blurred way. And it is exactly this discrepancy between seeing and not seeing, between recognizing and not recognizing, that Peter Baldinger explores in his diffusion drawings and paintings. This started as early as in the 90s with female nudes and was later transferred to other kinds of subjects. Here we have two acrylic paintings called Flash, created in 2008. We recognize a female upper body, but the contours of the body are blurred through the look through the textured glass. Also, the face is extinguished by the reflection of the flashlight, and thereby the woman is not recognizable as an individual, she is anonymized. So the textured glass can be also seen as a symbol of this discrepancy between the need of transparency and also the need for the protection of the privacy. And these terms are also omnipresent in the media discourse nowadays. Peter Baldinger, who are also an artist who is deeply shaped in his artistic practice by the media world, also due to your employment as a reporter. So how has your artistic work been influenced by your work as a reporter? Are you also interested in criticizing the media world?
In my youth, in my former job as a reporter, I learned that there is a big difference between what you witnessed and what recipients ultimately tell to others about the stories when they read it. And without any bad will. It's the same with press photographs. There is a big difference which angle, which detail, which point of view and which format is shown in the paper. And that makes a difference what one sees or wants to see in this picture in the paper. And in a way, this ambivalence, this technique, I took from them into my artistic work and tried to create pictures that want viewer to take another look, a second look, to really check exactly what he sees before he takes a judgment. So in a way, I tried to paint paintings against prejudice.
So we now turn to this year's works, in which Petra Baldinger deals with two great artists of the 20th century, namely with Pablo Picasso and Willem de Kooning. Variations based on works of art history are already a constant in Petra Baldinger's work. They were also, for a long time, frequent subjects in the series Diffusion. The dissolution of the subject was an integral part of the working process of both Picasso and de Kooning. And Petra Baldinger builds on this tradition of dissolution in the modern painting. As we see in the Guernica Diffusion, the figuration is completely dissolved. The original figures have completely disappeared in this impasto application of acrylic paint, in this black, white and grey abstract forms. It is interesting that those who know Picasso's iconic painting will most likely recognize the original work solely through typical color scheme and the distribution of the colored areas. In this way, the viewer's horizon of experience is put to the test, and in the end, it is also about how little one has to depict in order to recognize something. The dialogue with the Spanish painter continues in the following rooms. In focus are Baldinger's variations based on Picasso's depictions of Dora Maar as a weeping woman. From 1937, Picasso captured his lover in a large number of portraits, and she also inspired the motif of the weeping woman, which already played a central role in the monumental Guernica. Picasso then elaborated this motif in a series of paintings, studies and drawings. Baldinger has worked intensively on this series, using some of the most beautiful and also some of the lesser known examples as a template. In this room we show, among other things, 4 so-called Dora Maar diffusions. They are watercolors on handmade paper. The sharp contours, typical of Picasso's imagery, are deformed into shaky lines. The color areas are dissolved so that we can no longer recognize facial features of the portrait woman. These 2 large format Dora Maar diffusions represent the highlight of Baldinger's intense study of Picasso's series. This time we have 2 oil paintings in front of us. It's interesting to see how the same process produces a different effect on each individual image. The model for the diffusion painting on the left was an oil painting from 1937 and shows a crying woman with her head slightly nodded back and biting into a handkerchief in her affect. It's interesting to see that the color which is used is not associated with grief. The meaning of these images goes far beyond the portrayal. And this is actually also a parallel between Picasso's works and your works, because you are also very preoccupied with the genre portrait since a very long time. And you also always alienate the model or the subject through different processes. It can be the process of diffusion, or as in your series, low resolution pixelation, or the representation from behind. But what sense does the portrait have for you if it's not about the recognizability of what is depicted?
Yeah, it's also a thing that comes from my former career as a reporter. At that time, we put delinquents or convicts as portrait photos into the paper and printed a black bar over their face to make them unrecognizable. And this ambivalence in portrait painting is what interests me in my art. While at the beginning of the art of portraiture, prominent personalities like princes or popes were depicted to demonstrate their fame. In the age of the mass media, the portrait became a millionfold multiplication of the anonymity it created itself. For me, the game between showing and hiding has the greatest appeal in this supreme discipline of image creation.
In addition to Baldinger's variations based on Picasso's works, we are finally showing his preoccupation with American-Dutch painter Willem de Kooning. Willem de Kooning is one of the most famous names of abstract expressionism, but in contrast to let's say, Mark Rothko or Jackson Pollock, Willem de Kooning started with figurative painting. Just like Picasso, de Kooning portrayed women with an obsessive frequency, and in doing so, he was also influenced by the Dora Maar pictures, which were made only a few years earlier. Like Picasso, de Kooning was also not interested in traditional embodiments of femininity, but his images of women are radically different. These 3 drawings are based on de Kooning's Woman series. It's charcoal and ink, in 2 cases also pastel on handmade paper. This diffusion drawing was created after a study for Marilyn Monroe made by de Kooning in 1951. In general, however, in contrast to Picasso's pictures, de Kooning's depictions of women cannot be associated with a specific woman. They are archetypal female bodies that de Kooning dissolves in a violent process of painted abstraction. The figure is now exposed in Baldinger's diffusion into a second process of dissolution, and it disappears in these diffuse lines in pencil and ink, almost into complete abstract form. The Kooning series Woman shocked the audience at the time of its creation in the 50s due to the violent, grotesquely demonic representation of women. A misogynist character was even ascribed to these pictures. In any case, these are no women who can be considered beautiful in the superficial sense of the word and who meet the media-controlled claims of perfection. How did the women, the Koonings, affect you, and how did you come into contact with these images?
It was in 1997 when I got to know de Kooning better, when I spent time in Virginia with USA with a scholarship, and in the Richmond Museum of Art and in the Hirschhorn collection in Washington, I have seen the first time de Kooning paintings standing in front of them. And immediately I fell in love with his massive painterly gesture. And it is precisely his approach that is so fascinating to me. He is not at all misogynist. De Kooning's women don't be models, not sex symbols. These pictures of women are first and foremost exciting, violent paintings. And for me, in making art, that stands above everything, even above the subject, the act of painting.